Welcome to Project Chatter, the podcast where PPM experts from various sectors talk about the latest trends. Listen to Val and Dale as they talk about tried and tested best practices and share their unfiltered thoughts about the industry. Whether you're here to learn how to progress your career, improve your project control skills, or just want to hear an Aussie and South African rant about projects, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Project Chatter podcast with your hosts, Dale Fung and Val Matthews.
Hello, project people. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Project Chatter. Season 9? I guess this is the first time I've been here, but I was just having a moment there. Welcome back, Dale. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Val. I'm glad you've managed to make it off your helicopter and join us for Season 9, Episode 204, just in case you were wondering.
Don't give me shit for these. These are fantastic. Lawrence, it's always good to see you, mate. It's been too far between episodes, but welcome back.
Nice to see you again, guys.
Very good. We were talking probably too much, actually, offline. Now we've forgotten what we're going to talk about online. But I know that we all dabble in the interesting arts of AI and I guess the practical application for it in our industry. And what's interesting to me is there's a few early risers in terms of who's kind of progressing forward with this, innovating with it, testing it, breaking it, trialing it. And Lawrence, you happen to be one of the best things to follow on LinkedIn right now. I actually absolutely love your approach to chat. You're not expecting like fantastic silver bullets. You're being pragmatic about it. Very engineering of you, actually, the way you're breaking it down. And I thought we could just go a bit of a round table on all of our experiences. And I think you're the same, Lawrence. You said something before we pressed record around, we're all kind of doing different things with the same technology, but in a different way and approaching it a different way. And I'd love to unpack that. But what have you been up to since we last caught up?
So I think like AI for projects has settled down in many ways, right? So where we were 18 months ago, was it? I think we just, in terms of the building public stuff, we were talking all about those custom GPTs, remember them? And we were excited about that. And we had some variant of GPT-4. And that was all about packaging use cases and packaging some documents up and just proving it was possible and giving it to someone. And I think since then, we've like multimodal has just blossomed, right? So maybe the only one that we've not got is we were talking about action as a mode, as a modality, and we haven't got that exactly. We still got bits on that, but like multimodal in and out for most things. Dale, you were talking about the form factor, and actually how, and now I think there are more and more form factors for everyone in terms of how you interact with it. We had like sort of 4.5, which was like a much bigger model. I love 4.5. Sorry, getting straight into the weeds already, but just sort of thinking back. And then we started to get the reasoning models. We started with chain of thought, and basically been using all these things. And I think now for me, I think the main thing is that obviously it depends client to client. You make arrangements with the client as to how you use or don't use AI with them or for them. But I'm now mostly AI first, right? So in larger teams, it's harder. But I try to do things with AI first. And just what I guess one or two more ticks. So after 4.5 and the chain of thought, the reasoning models went 01, 02, 03, but we don't need to worry about those anymore because now, obviously we've got GPT-5, but something that we should talk about at some point is the agent. The agents that came out in the first 3 or 4 months of this year, which are insanely good. Sort of Codex operator that's now got rolled into ChatGPT agent. And what was the other one? And deep research. You almost forget, like you've got a research agent now, right? And then we've now got we've gone from the 4 series just in the last week or so into the 5 series, GPT-5. And one of the things that I remember us talking about like 18 months ago was the democratization of access. And I think the GPT-5, there's loads of things, but that's my biggest impression is that it means that anyone can now use a high-class model, and they don't even need to like select it. You don't need to pay for it. Maybe you can't get that many uses, but I think that just makes everything so much more accessible. And also, I think we're going to stop getting stupid conversations. Where people are, where sort of intelligent leaders who just haven't had time on ChatGPT keep talking to you, but about something they don't understand just because they're using an old model. And so I think that's gone. So I think 18 months. I think the big thing for me, I was advocating AI use for projects, but now I'm just like mostly AI first, and I'm a little bit less pressured about like people will catch up in their own time, right? And yeah, so that's the big arc for me. So
it's and I think we've all been on this. We dabbled, we started playing, we weren't sure whether we should trust it. We started applying small tactical projects, and I think you're the best example of that, Lawrence. Like here's a graph, here's some data, but now the research piece and the reasoning models are. I actually am semi terrified and excited at how fast this is going, because if you future pace this, where are we going to be in another 18 months and another 18 months? And usually I think I'm relatively quick at picking things up, and I think we all acknowledge the pace at which this is running, and because of the competition is huge, right? You've got Anthropic, you've got Google, you've got market. Everyone's trying to take a piece of the same market because it is a blue ocean. It's something that is that it will be very hard, like you said, Lawrence, to distinguish when we kick off projects in perhaps the next 2 to 5 years where AI won't be first. It'll almost be like a default setting. You would start a project and you would have a number of agents help collate your bid to mobilization period, that transition period, which is like usually the yuckiest disorganized rubbish. It's a very interesting world we're going to be living in, and I wanted to just get your views on agents, because you said agents. So what's your experience with agents? I know we're going straight into the detail, but I think that's what our listeners expect these days.
Yeah, I hope people don't mind, and I just think the people we've got on this pod. Let's just get into the detail, and I want to push that back to you in a minute, Val, and you, Dale, because just before we go into agents, I'm not going to let you two get away with it, right? So Dale, we were saying, I follow you a lot, you and Alan, on the Gen AI, and maybe Val when you turn up and all and that kind of thing. So and you really are shaping the conversation around how to use and adopt these technologies. And Val, there's a lot I want to pump you on what you're able to say about how you're designing agent teams for clients. But I think I'll say one thing about agents to kick us off, which is that the GPT-5 thing, we mustn't. GPT-5 is very exciting, but we mustn't forget the agent spring that we've had, because it's just been temporarily overshadowed, but it will come back very quickly, because very soon GPT-5 will be given agentic capabilities as well, just like the earlier models were, the GPT-4s were. And the agent is, it's under, because they're doing, if you like, they're pushing these things out slowly, because they're trying to see how people will use it. And so it's only people like me that have got pro subscription and that kind of thing that are really using an agent. I think you could get a few on Plus. You could get a few. You could get a few a week, that kind of thing on Plus. But the agentic stuff is really powerful. It's basically got it's a computer using tool. So it will browse visually, and it will interact and go through websites, just like Operator did. But Operator we can forget about, because they've already taken that off the menu, because agent's superior. And also it has a text browser as well, so it can read documents very fast by reading it. It's got a terminal for coding. And it will just do a lot more. And it was a very smart model. And also, just, I know it's little things, right, but they matter. They sorted out it preparing Microsoft Office documents as outputs. So I'd often ask for a spreadsheet and a PowerPoint exec deck and a report. The presentations were actually readable on first go. and very good, to be honest, really good. So I think GPT-5, what I'm now doing is, I don't think most people should do this. I think most people should just focus on GPT-5, but I'm actually running most things through Agent and through GPT-5 at the same time. And you're just getting really powerful answers. So, but that's just me on Agent. Over to you, Val, first. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to push that back to you.
Yeah, no, I love it.
What are you doing on Agents?
Well, the stuff I can share, like a good example is the practicality of doing it whilst doing something else. So I'm a big believer in multitasking, although sometimes I never finish anything. But that you spoke about multimodal. So picture this then. I was on the plane yesterday and I decided to come up with something, but I had no one to talk to about it, and it was kind of personal. It was about a reinvention in the security space, and I don't think it's ever been done before. So I was able to sit on there with Agent Mode did some of the work for me, but it was mainly ChatGPT 5. I was able to come up with a full IP submission for a patent as well in Australia, with all the regulations, all the requirements, all the deep research, everything to compliance standards in a Word document. Back to your point, Lawrence, ready for me to submit today. And I'm going to submit our first patent for $100 in Australia. And I thought, bloody hell, if this was even a year ago, Lawrence, it would take me some time, and I'd probably need a lawyer, and I'd probably need this and that. But at the speed I'm going, I feel like I could run multiple projects. And with Agent, and I haven't dabbled as much as I should really in Agent, probably not as much as you, Lawrence. The first thing I did with it, just so a bit of shits and giggles, is I booked a date for my wife and I, date night. I just wanted to see how it would behave, and I think for a lot of the listeners, they probably haven't tested it out in the world. And what I mean by that is watching it do what it does, which I think is a great, which is a great window insight, because it could just come up with the answers and said, Val, I've booked your room or your dinner, blah blah blah. But it doesn't. It goes, well, I'm going to show you what I do. And it goes on. And I think this is a trust exercise. And I think it's very clever of OpenAI to do that. So you see a preview window of, I'm going to this website. I'm checking where you live. I'm checking relevant areas and reviews of restaurants. I'm pulling them back. I'm getting the top 5. I know you like meat, so I'm going to go here, here, and here. And then what's available, go back onto the booking reservation system and then type in your email, your details, 2 people on this date, checked your calendar, blah, 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 blah. And obviously there's some prompts in there to feed that information, like your availability, etc. But you can see in probably the next iteration with some integrations perhaps, that you're not going to have to do that. And it booked it within about 2 minutes. And by the way, I was doing something else as well. So again, back to this multimodal multitasking piece of work, I find it phenomenal as a first starter. And then we started looking at proof of concepts. So back to your point, Lawrence, what do we use agents and AI for? We do a lot of prototyping in my company, and that's because we are a consultancy first, and we don't pretend to be a product company. But what's interesting, and Dale and I have had similar conversations about what does the future of consulting look like. And I actually think there's something in professional services and products kind of coming together at some point. And I wasn't convinced until I saw that Sam Altman was opening his own consultancy for OpenAI. And I was like, well played, mister. Well played. And so it's just emboldened, I guess, our approach that we are on the right track, that consulting and almost like client-side proof of concepts will be a way forward. It's a way for us to get past the human inhibitions, the apprehension, the risk aversity that we have, because clients are and projects are very, very sensitive to change. And if you implement something, you also want to know that it's going to do the right thing for everybody involved. So we do a lot of what we call fast, rapid prototype, a bit of a design thinking approach.
Yeah.
And what we found is, first of all, ChatGPT is creative. And I have this debate a lot with people that it will never take, the human element jobs, and they're like, it'll take the transactional work like accounting and maybe a bit of scheduling and the things that are repeatable. And I actually don't think that's true. Maybe in a small sense, and it'll be a blip on the radar in my perspective, Lawrence. But when I see agency, when I see agentic models and how they operate, I think they're far more valuable in the strategic / creative space, because we've built agents and specialized agents in the data space that have been part of a roundtable conversation. And I don't know if you've used them for these roundtables, Dale and Lawrence, but that it's like having you guys around with Alan and Greg, and the only thing they don't do is drink whiskey, Lawrence. Otherwise, they'd be my best friend.
Yet.
But it's absolutely. I'd love to know what Dale thinks about all of this stuff too.
It's interesting. I haven't played around with Agent or ChatGPT Agent, but a few months back I did use Manus.
Right, yeah.
Manus AI, and it's not too dissimilar, right, to what you're describing there. And I was flabbergasted because it shows you all the screens, the website, is how it's researching, what it's clicking on, and all that type of thing. But I guess to give listeners a view of when I think of agents, what I mean when I say that is I'm giving AI agency to make decisions in a given context. And so when I talk about agents, I think of them with specific roles rather than sort of a general agent, rather than agentic AI. An AI agent for me is an AI with a specific role, something to do. So you could get, for example, a project planner agent that could have multimodal or does have multimodal abilities to see a camera feed on site and identify what's happened, if there's any issues, and feed that back into progress or compensation events or early warnings, or whatever the case might be, because you're giving it this role. And it could potentially talk to the contract or commercial manager agent that writes, the early warning or the compensation event or whatever the case might be. So just to put into context, when I talk about AI agents, this is what I think about. And I think that's important because we use these words and people just have different views on it. So when it comes to AI agents, I try and think of specifically on projects, what are the specific roles that AI agents can play? And that goes into the thinking what that Val was saying in terms of what do we offer as consultants, right? And how can we use the technology to improve on our services, right? Because we're not I think Al, with a nod to Gen AI, is famous for saying a couple of months before Satya Nadella that SaaS is dead, right? And in truth, it is. If I had a SaaS product, I'd be shitting myself. Because all of a sudden, creating an AI agent, when we spoke 18 months ago, was something that was out there. Now it's accessible. I mean, we've spoken about this offline. What is the number one programming language? English. Your ability to talk in English or type in English, right? That is coding these days. So yeah, it's a very interesting one, but keen to sort of just get your views on what Val and I said there, Lawrence.
Well, I think the big thing for me is what you're saying, Dale, is that like 18 months ago, we were talking about like when agents would come a little bit, and we were kind of thinking like how custom GPTs were like that first thing of where you can give a live capability of some sense to someone else. But now each three of us, right, have now like actually are now doing it. Right. And so there are others out there. And I think that's probably for some of your audience, that's probably the thing, is that each of us have got stories to tell on agents. So I think people should start to pay attention to people in their company that are probably already using agents, whether in shallow mode or not, because it's if you like, the baseline has changed. I think also the thing that I think from a personal level, the thing. And interestingly, I think some of the personal things become more important because they're actually the bottlenecks. So I've been noticing where I've been encountering my own resistance to like using agents, because that's what you'll probably find is going to happen with your teammates and your clients, and because obviously I'm an enthusiastic user, and I notice, and so I'm fascinated when I get my own resistance come up, and so. I'm often finding that I'm actually working on and working through the points of resistance when they come up, because those will be, if you like, a cultural phenomenon rather than just my psychology. And specifically with agents, the blocker that I've been having is going from like running one or two agents to like running 2 to 4 agents, which I know it sounds silly and trivial, right? But it's just in the last 2 or 3 months, Well, I mean, let me be concrete on it. Like 8 weeks ago, the coding agent codex, right? Technically, you're allowed to run, and you're allowed to run 60 agents in parallel. Okay, and I got a little bit kind of freaked out by that. Because I was very excited running one, and then I ran two at the same time. And then similar thing with the ChatGPT agent, which came out last month or 6 weeks ago, is luckily I'm on a pro subscription, but it gave me about 400 agent uses over the course of a month. And I was determined to use them, right? Because I'm like, well, each one of those is about a half an hour run, typically 10 minutes to 45 minutes, the thing would run. So I was like, I need to learn. If I'd been told 2 years ago I can have like something intelligent on some dimension sort of do work for me, and I've got like, basically, if you think about it, that's about say 15 times half an hour. That's a working day I've been given for my £200 subscription. So I was like, right, easy. All I have to do is set 20 agents running every day for a month, and then I'm using it. And I had the same problem as I had with Codex, which is that I was like, my head kind of exploded. And so I had to sort of step back and like work out, well, what's going on here? Why can't I do it? And so I've been slowly like working on those things. Because because it's like we're some of the, we're lucky enough to be early on this, and like the resistance that we're having is exactly what like we're working through. And I thought I would like, yeah, of course I want 5 agents rather than 2, but at the moment I can cope with 2 running at the same time. And I can sometimes cope with a Codex agent running in the background, but I'm just not used to it. And it's different even from when I've never run like big teams and big projects, but I've run quite a lot of small teams, sort of 5 to 12. And it's different again from that. It's like, it's not like, oh, well, I can run a team of 10, so I can run 10 agents. At least for me, that's not been my experience up to now. So I'm absolutely, so the bottlenecks that you think will be there are not necessarily the ones that actually are the things that will stop you using it. And so I think this is where, and again, back to your consultant's point, Val, I think this is where these non-obvious things are where we can help people go on a journey with them, right? So
yeah.
Well,
I the other thing to point out is and we've been doing some work. I was thinking about how we actually apply agents, and I have these conflicts about whether it's a tool or should we treat it more like an employee. And I found some similar resistance in the fact that it behaves more like an employee than a tool more and more, right? And it didn't start that way. It obviously started as a tool, an extension of the other applications we use. And the first glimpse of that was when I realized I didn't need to do APIs anymore. Theoretically, right? We don't need APIs anymore. If we have agents, I was thinking about this. It's like all the work we do to just connect tools together. We could just have agents if we treat them like connectors in the sense we do, right? They have an autonomous, specialized role. And one of the things we haven't talked yet is about planning versus execution agents. So we can actually have agents working for agents in a way. And so the easiest way to explain that to somebody is like an org chart, right? And so we're in the process at the moment of testing how would that look. And back to your point of how many agents can you have before you freak out? I don't know, mate. I haven't actually executed this, but we're building in the background an entire C-suite, and we're testing exactly what that would look like.
Awesome.
And the other question we had was like, could we emulate the org chart so that each person and personality was emulated from the original person we modeled it from? For example, if we had a CEO, a COO, a CDO, a CSO, whatever it is, their personality traits, their interests, their values, their ethic and moral system could all be digitized very easily. Their voice, their characteristics, their decision tree, because we know there's a buying process and everyone has their own internal dialogue to some degree. So we could do that. And then we could understand their educational history. We could load that in. So I'm pretty convinced once we finish this little exercise that we would have an entire org chart emulating the people that sit in those physical roles and then present that back to them. and have them join in on meetings. So I'm thinking it's the kind of like the read.ai, but the next level, Lawrence, where let's say you can't make a meeting, you're catching a flight, whatever it is, you're like, shit, I can't make it. You call your agent, Agent Lawrence, I can't make this. Can you get in there and help them out? There's probably a few decisions to make. It does all the rest. Picks up all your information, looks at the last meeting, gets all its notes together. Maybe you give it a little bit of a briefing, and then it goes in there, and on your behalf, it starts acting, talking, and executing. And I wouldn't have thought that was possible 18 months ago, just talking about our journey to date, guys. I think it's something that's hit me like over the last month. That's how fresh I think this stuff is. And it's not like I'm the only one having these little tests and toys, but I came back to this creativity piece, and it came up during a round table with AI, because I said, how can we give the C-suite more time and capacity to understand AI? Because one of the big challenges is their understanding. They don't necessarily, they've seen all the news and they probably see all our posts, Lawrence, but for them to kind of comprehend what that means to them, there's a big gap. And so we do a lot of it kind of almost like not free therapy, but it's like free AI advice and coaching. It's like, hey, listen, here's some simple pictures for you to get ahead or understand at least how it all kind of fits in. And we did a roundtable on like, how can we give them more time? And one of the ideas was like, why don't you just replicate the organizational chart? And that was given by one of the AIs in the round table. It wasn't a person. And then all the people in the room, because it was the 3 or 4 of us plus the AI. They're like, oh, that's a great idea. I said, well, and then I had the audacity to say, well, don't give me credit, give Agent X, a credit. And now I'm thanking the AI in the round table for the great idea that it gave us for the advice to build this invention. So I think from an agency perspective, I think people have to really like think outside the box. It really is capable of pretty much, and I think this is the next 18 months, but it'll be capable of pretty much anything in our space, in the project white space, or the what do you call the white collar roles. Very, very exciting.
That's insane. I mean, you're taking it so much further, but you're absolutely right to. And by the way, Dan, don't know if you come across Dan Shipper, but Dan Shipper, I forget the name of his small company, but he's doing. He's one of the pioneers in the space that you're talking about, Val. And actually, he's got quite a small company, consulting company, but again, he encourages people to go to his agent first, if you like, for questions and thoughts, and then go through all of that, and then only and then when they have a conversation with his colleague, if you like, some of the obvious stuff some of the obvious crud has gone out. I think it's worth saying that because some people will be wide-eyed listening to you, right? Okay, and I think it's important to say that people could actually do not as sophisticated as what you're doing, but they could do it within 20 minutes, right? Okay, you could do it on Gemini and you could do it on Claude, because both Gemini and Claude have what's called they have an AI powered thing that whereby you can create a little web app or an artifact, and in the last 2 or 3 months, you can ask for it to be AI powered, and what that means is you can have a little Gemini or a little Claude as part of the web app, and then you can give it to your colleague. So I set up a little kind of preparatory conversation example, for example, on a contract discussion. So it's a little web app, and it took me 20 minutes to create. I just gave it the context. It researched the this was Gemini, I think I did it. It researched the context, and then I asked it to add in a Claude agent. Actually, no, it was Gemini. It added a Gemini agent. And then that conversation that you were saying you were happening about all around the table, that round table was like 3/4 AIs and just like 1/4 me. And so anyone who's listening to this can actually go and do that if with a kind of $20 a month model. Right now, I'm not saying you should, but I'm just saying this stuff isn't out there. And people should be trying this. I think one other thing to pick up on is, and it's back on your point, Dale, on the sort of death of SaaS, etc. Is I agree with you in many ways, and I think it dovetails with some of the things you're saying about consulting, Val. But I'm increasingly finding that I'm taking clients with me by giving them small project point solutions, which have got, I think last time we were talking about local data, local highly specific data. And because you can create these web apps, so this is a different, and it's important, I think people understand that this is a different capability to multimodal. We've talked about multimodal. We've talked about the massive improvement of capabilities, and we've talked about agents. Probably one other thing that's happened in the last 18 months is this rise of essentially being able to create web apps, which you can do with Gemini, ChatGPT or Claude and the others, but it's most straightforward in those, and you can give them to your colleagues. And what you'll find is, I'm finding that people, what sort of early clients like the best is you just give them a little kind of little dashboard. I hate that word. Let's call it tiles of apps. Okay, like say 8 or 12, but each of them address a particular little project situation. And each of them is a little app, and then it gives them the confidence that they can start building for themselves. Because I've got, like, on my little kind of personal website, for example, I've now got about 50 of them just sort of jostling around there, and they're very easy to set up and organize, and it means that data analysis can become very specific to actually what you're doing, and in particular, it can realize the dream that we had, or maybe dreams a bit much, but the hope that we had for all of this Power BI visualization 2015 onwards, right? We were so excited that things would become visual and interactive and that kind of thing, and a lot of that happened. But now, if you like to engage and interact, and you like to sort of see things and like see how things relate to each other, rather than in a spreadsheet or whatever, now you can create a graph, or you can create an image or a picture or something with lots of explanation buttons. However people like to consume and understand, you can now do that with these like sort of web apps. I think that's a really good way of getting people starting on their journey, because it's almost like we still like do PowerPoint reports, we still do documents, we still do Excel, and you can do all of that with the help of agents as well now. But also you can give someone a website now. You can give someone a project website as an output. You don't need to wait like a week. You can literally do that. And so some of the people in people's organizations are probably doing that for themselves to plan holidays and that kind of thing. And if you encourage them, they'll start to do that on your client, within on that organization's problems as well. But you have to encourage them, I think. So yeah, there's a lot of things to pull on.
Yeah. Do you remember, 18 months ago, there's a lot of things we said, and, a lot of people, skeptics, let's say, came out and said, oh, it's Skynet, scaremongering, all these various things. And, if you look at, let's say if we futurescape a little bit here, Lawrence, right? I know Val loves this segment where we futurescape a bit. And I've said it before on multiple podcasts and episodes that if you think about the technology we have at hand, perhaps UX and UI and dashboards are actually a thing of the past, because if it depends on the appetite of humans on projects and how much we want to allow computers to make decisions. And so if we have robotics on site building stuff, right, it takes the human element out of it. Because what is the advantage of a human managing a human, right? We have perhaps a bit more emotional intelligence right now, but as we know, computer vision, you feed the computer enough images of a cat, it tells you it's a cat. It should start picking up human emotion over time as well. But let's say we go down the health and safety route and say, actually, we want fewer deaths, suicides, etc., health and safety incidents, and we want actually machinery to build these very dangerous, complex projects for us in the built environment. And so we have AI agents, a swarm of AI agents in the background, analyzing everything and instructing these robots on site on what they need to do. And this goes back to a nod to Al. We should probably get him on the episode, to his whole sort of one-person or zero-person company, right? What do humans do?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll say this and we'll say it over and over on a few episodes, and people go, yeah, you guys are fantasizing Skynet, ha ha ha, Matrix. But that technology exists today. That's the trouble. I then go and I look at what's holding us back. And for me, a lot of it still is resistance in IT departments, right? And I know that's changing, but that barrier, I think, still exists because we said before the project profession industry is slow to adopt and adapt. I think it's changing, but I think it's also worth noting we're all excited. We work in an echo chamber, I think, and we work with people and decision makers that are excited about this stuff, and we have opportunities to test all of this on projects with real tangible results and showcasing value. But there's still a large, I feel, poor population, I don't know which is the right word to use there, of organizations that are a bit sort of lagging behind. I guess my question of you is, how do we bring the rest of everyone along the journey, or don't we? Do we just let the adoption curve take its course and let it be?
So there's about 8 issues in there, Dale, and I think you're right. Luckily, again, this is why everyone should listen to the Gen AI podcast, because you guys go deep on these things, including some of the ethics. And I think I'm much more relaxed about it now than I was even 18 months ago, because, it is that you can now create value, even if it's just in your evenings. You can create value and you can see the value you're creating. And that's going to be happening at different points in companies now. And so even if like you're 8 hours a day at your job, you're not able to do that, and people will still create value. And at a certain point, when people are creating like the same amount of value, but for 10x less effort or 10x less cost, at a certain point, things just switch. But again, at one particular place within the ecosystem at a time. And so I do think so just to use an annoying word, but it's like disintermediation. I think it is a useful word. Is an actual thing. Many of the intermediaries will disappear. The middlemen will not all the middlemen, but will disappear. Because I'm noticing a lot of senior clients get it. And a lot of the people like actually delivering on the ground floor get it. And so it's these different tiers in between, some of which 10 or 20% really get it, right? And they have their own AI, or they use ChatGPT Enterprise or whatever. And so ultimately, people think some arrangements will just occur over the top of the current intermediaries over, I'm talking 5, 10, 15 years. And then, depends on what your view of like economics and things is, but it's Schumpeterian destruction. People will say there's a chap called Schumpeter that talks about creative destruction, and he was writing about it in the 1920s. But there's a sense in which like the thing over a period of time, over longer periods of time, people forget that essentially old companies die and new companies grow. And so your company doesn't like adopt AI. What happens is that some companies will adopt AI, and if that is a good thing, as in if it does make you more efficient, maybe it doesn't, right? If it does make you more efficient, then you'll probably be around for another 5, 10, 15, 20 years, 50 years. But then a certain percentage won't adopt. And if that's a bad thing, and maybe it's not a bad thing, then those companies just ultimately become ineffective and eventually fail. And then the new companies, so it's not like we all have to adopt it. It's that new organizations over time will adopt it, and the ones that don't adopt it just disappear. Luckily people will then find jobs in those new ones, but so you might lose a job in 5 years' time, right? For a tier one of something, right? But then you'll go and find a job in a company that was like AI first and founded in 2022 or something. That's now a 100-person company. I'm talking in 2027. So individually, you'll be all right, but it doesn't mean that you as a company. So that would be my take. Yeah, but it's a bit contentious.
It can be. There's a few things to unpack in, as usual, in Dale's summary questions, because he's very clever. He's a master of interviewing. But well, first of all, it's a free market, so we want to encourage free markets, and that means, as you said quite rightly, Lawrence, there's the death of the old and the birth of the new, and that's a great opportunity because it's very rare a whole type of working shifts, right? This is pretty significant, and the only other really one that I've experienced, and I was too young to really experience it properly, was the .com website explosion when everything became online. I was relatively young, so I wasn't working at that stage, but I saw it, and I saw the implications of such. And I used to think that we could measure these things on a time basis, and I'm not sure actually. I don't know if it's a 15-year time wave, Lawrence. I think time is compressing at such a rate that these releases and the competition to keep up is just accelerating each month. There's something new that comes out. And I saw an interview with Sam Altman about the next breakthrough, and I think this is going to be the one that convinces the masses, right? The intermediaries, the people that are on the bench, the non-early adopters, so the opposite to us three, is when AI comes up with a proper breakthrough. And I probably would say this is something like a cure for cancer or something significant, very significant, that humans have been trying for decades, and we've just not been able to break it. And then here comes AI and just solves it in a day, And Sam Altman was like, look, I think we're in that period where AI is that good in the next 2 years, and that's his time, right? The next 2 years, we're going to see an enhancement of such, and one that's super exciting and fantastic. And I do hope it's something health related, but it'll be the start of a trigger of a series of breakthroughs. It won't be like we'll have one and then we'll wait another 2 years. It'll be exponential breakthroughs, and obviously there's some challenges around compute, and we've talked about this, and I think Jen I has talked about this a bit, but the compute power will also fundamentally shift, and the energy consumption will shift, and I think it's a very exciting place to be. I do wonder what happens though, and I had this debate personally with friends and family about like, oh no, okay, AI is going to take my jobs. What do we do? Is there going to be a premise for social, like a basic universal income, or are we expecting everyone to adapt and adopt? And I'm not sure about that. That's an open-ended question for both of you. I think that from an economic perspective, I'm really not sure. But I think there'll be enough wealth generation in the AI world that we'll be able to come up with some pretty interesting ways of dealing with these problems. The other thing is, I think if we get to a point where AI is compensating some of our roles, the kind of Henry Ford model of working 5 days a week is also up for discussion. Do we have to work 9 to 5 days a week? Or is there a way where we are doing more with less, which is always a goal of mine, and I'm sure with you too. Like if I could just spend a bit more time at home or with the family or with friends or in the sunlight, I tend to be in the basement a lot. That would be fantastic. And then I think there's another question about humanity, which is if smart people had more time, we would pick bigger problems to solve. And that's like the philanthropic side of me. And I know Dale and I talk about paying it forward all the time. And I think people like yourself, Lawrence, and I know there's other people out there that would, if they have the capacity, they would be doing more good in the world. And I can only see positives of all of this, unless, of course, AI becomes sentient and decides to kill us all. But other than that, dystopian future, I feel like there's only an uptick and positivity that's going to come from this for everybody involved. I guess the question back to you guys is, where do you see the biggest breakthrough in, say, projects for AI? I know we talked about, Lawrence, like the little web apps and showing them what's possible. But where do you see, like, if you were to put a bet on it, where would you like to see, or you think AI is going to provide the biggest bang for buck on projects?
You see, I think it's here now. So I'm not quite answering your question because I mean I do use it most of the time, and I think also that we'll always be able to do things. I think we'll always be able to do things the way we currently do them if we want to, when we want to, right? So when you want to do something the old way, you should do it that way. Just like, was it in 1915, there were 15 million horses in the USA, right? And like now there are 2 million. But those horses, when they're ridden, they've probably got a better sort of standard of life, and people enjoy, and probably the horses enjoy like sort of being ridden more. And so we can always still do things as craftsmanship, and to learn our crafts and that kind of thing. And I do think there are scenarios within companies where one of the worries that I've got for right now is I think there's just going to be a lot of bullshit in some companies. So because in the specific sense that people will learn, you can generate a lot of value from AI, but you can create an awful lot of paperwork. And I'm fine. And I'm sorry, I'm still not answering your question, but I just I think so. When I go to my local gym, and this wasn't just me, but when I go to my local gym, people there are using AI, and it's not a city gym. It's like people, all jobs are there, right? People are using AI to advocate for themselves and their families, and advocate for themselves at work when they're getting squeezed out or there's a fight at work, and to write the letters that before they've never written, the kind of letters that, I'm comfortable writing a letter. But I am seeing people across the organization, and lower down the organization, like lobbying for themselves and helping their colleagues to do that. And so AI for me is already a fact of use. It's not officially recognized. And a lot of the paperwork, but if the HR department starts doing the same as them, right? And like generating 20 pages that has to be signed every week, right? Or whatever. Okay. And I think some companies will go into that not many, but will go into that self-destruct cycle, because like the uses of AI will be people that can see it as a way of essentially of just perpetuating their roles. So for me, I completely agree with you that, that actually there are some shining stars on the hill in terms of what the use cases are, Val. But I think it's on everything where you're not actually physically walking around the site and moving things around. I think it's hard for me to say it, but it's like, I think most things I use AI for, and so it's hard for me to like narrow it down for a use case. Do I use it for controls? Yes, I use it for controls. Do I use it for reporting? Yes. Do I use it for governance? Yes. Do I use it for prioritization? Yeah. Do I use it for project support? So you go through all these things, and I use it for everything. And then just one last thing on coming back sort of 20 minutes or so ago, about you were talking about how the agent, again, this is another thing that's underrated, I think, that you pointed out, Val, is that I'd like to point out to the people listening, is that you can now watch those agents work. Now, if you want to, you can sit and watch the whole thing. But the great thing is you can now, that whole like might be 30 minutes it goes off working for you. You can actually it saves that replay. Okay, so I've now learned to go into the output at the end, and if I like the output, I check the output, and then there's normally something, right, where I'm like, oh, how did it do that bit? Right, and you can literally what's that thing for? But you can basically pull the thing through until you find a minute 18. Here's the bit where it's looking at that website, and then where it's writing the code, where it's done the analysis, and I watch that bit. And so you could do that 10 days later. Okay, so actually, you can now give things to the AI, and you can start to validate what's happening. So you do the bit at the start, and you do the bit at the end. So I'm not seeing a killer app, Val. I'm just seeing it as being, it's stuff that's coming bottom up through the organization, and it's stuff that's coming top down from some of the enlightened leaders. But it's across all use cases. But I do agree that well, I'm not as far ahead as Dale, as farsighted as Dale yet, in terms of I'm not seeing it being used, except on some advanced companies in terms of advanced sensors, advanced robotics, advanced actuation. But watch that space. So maybe Dale, you could answer Val and give him an answer, because I can't give him a good answer.
So when you ask that, Val, my mind goes to, well, the biggest bang for buck has to be the biggest problem that we can solve with the technology. That's going to be the biggest bang for the buck. And if I look at it, I think from my viewpoint, the biggest challenge we have is that we have lost a shitload of experience of people retiring over years, and that knowledge hasn't necessarily been retained or passed down in a way that is easily transferable to everyone else. And because of the demand for people on projects, not just in the office but on site, we have more people that are inexperienced, not their fault, but just because of demand and supply. And if we can use AI to somehow augment and supplement that loss of experience to better deliver projects, then for me, that's the biggest bang for the buck. Now, maybe we're working on this call, I don't know, but imagine having these glasses, right, on site, and you're able to look at whatever you're building and it tells you exactly what you need to do because you've got this digital twin in the background. It's just this retained knowledge of what you can do. You can be an assistant project manager that's a couple of years in, and you know what needs to happen. So for me, it's things like that, is how can we use AI to improve the way we deliver projects, but from a real challenge perspective. Because for me, I look and I go, dashboards, right? You said earlier, Lawrence, you don't really like using the term dashboards, but you're still seeing, if you look at awards, people submitting for awards because they created cool dashboards. And that's great, but is that real value add, right? Are you laughing, Val? But this happens, right?
Oh, no, I'm laughing because it's true. The other day there was a guy, sorry to interrupt, there was a guy, and I don't have any, I mean, maybe there's a separate area for awards, but transformation of the year, I don't think is a dashboard, let's be honest. And I think on this call we can agree. But sorry to interrupt your flow there, Dale.
No, but it's this is a conversation rather than a monologue, and feel free to jump in whenever. I think the challenge becomes is if we are then to let's take that use case, right? You've got a whole bunch of freshmen, let's call it, people that are 3 to 5 years in. They've got a level of experience, but they don't have the depth of experience that someone that's been there for 20 odd years working on a depth and breadth of different projects has, delivering projects. And so we give them this augmentation, whether it's some sort of wearable that helps them deliver stuff. What's the barrier to that? So how does that wearable receive information? Where does it get it from? How do we know, is it accurate? What happens with security, data privacy as well? Because now imagining let's say it's the glasses, right? If you then recording everything I'm doing, like how does that work with GDPR and all these other aspects? So what are then the barriers to adoption? And then do these barriers, security measures, do they actually stop innovation? So there's all these questions to think about. I don't know, Lawrence, if that sort of gets the juices flowing a little bit.
And again, though, it all ties together, and this is why minds like yours, which are sort of global in the way they think, are so important, because it ties back to an earlier thing you were saying, right, about the ethics. Because obviously, and what something you were saying, Val, about sort of basic income and that kind of thing. Because one of the ways of framing, actually, so that's one of the negative ways of framing that use case, right, is people are being sort of retired early, right, and then they get pumped in the last week and like sit with an AI for 40 hours, and their lifetimes stuff goes into that, and they get 1 week of pay for that. So some of those sorts of things are an opportunity for the company and for society to think about how do we value that a lifetime's thing, and is that company property or is that in the part of the professor's property, and some of those things need to get discussed as we're discussing it now, and part of the community, and maybe some of the professional organizations will want to get involved, right? Because maybe you give them an extra 3 months because they're willing to sit in that room, and people will and you're good. This is where the emergence behaviors is going to happen, where people are reactive, or a reactant to a situation that they perceive consciously or unconsciously as being unfair. And there's going to be a lot of these as we go through them, because you can frame all of them probably in a charitable, because we see it in companies, right? You can frame like most interactions in a positive light and a negative light. And it very often depends on the personalities that you have to trust that actually the transaction that's going on is this one that's actually, because we've all been in the situation where you can tell, for example, where an operational model or cost transformation is reaching that point, right? And like where you so 4 months out you have to like quote all your figures, right? At 3 months out you have to kind of write down your year's plans. At 2 months out you have to describe the roles in your job, and at 1 month out you find you're in you're in a redundancy situation and they've got all your data. So so these are things we're going to have to find ways of talking about, because again, these are some of the very real reasons why people are uncomfortable, because they feel like AI is just another way of stiffing the man, right?
Yeah.
And
I just want to comment quickly there, Lawrence, before I jump to Val.
Yeah.
Just on your comment around, potentially having someone for a week, getting their knowledge and then letting them go type thing.
Which is also a great thing.
Sure. But my view on knowledge is that the knowledge I have isn't mine. The knowledge I have is something that someone else has pulled together, and over the history of humanity, we've accumulated different strands of knowledge, and they've been passed on to us. And so we have a duty of care to pass that on as well. And so, I used to think, well, it's my knowledge. I know this, and But the more I think about it, and particularly through the journey through this podcast, is we actually all stand on the shoulders of giants that have gone before us, and we've learned from them. We've improved from where they've left off and passed the baton on. It's one of the reasons Val and I started this podcast, is because we had fantastic people around us and wanted to share. But yeah, I just wanted to sort of comment on that knowledge piece.
I agree with you, but I also think that people get stiffed on a regular basis. So
yes, yeah.
So and when it's knowledge work, when it's knowledge work, and you're literally giving it to an AI, I think people should think about things like that. And I agree in many ways it's a good thing, and I think you're very enlightened, Dale. But yeah. I don't disagree with you at all. So
it's that balancing act. I think it's how do you properly remunerate someone for the years.
But also, one thing I hate, right, is and it only happens some of the time. But when you're being given something that feels like a societal advance, right, and everyone says, "Oh, go on, it'd be good for you, and you should adopt it," and that kind of thing, and then only later you find out in what way you've been stiffed, right? So. Yeah. So
that's how I felt about the COVID vaccination, to be honest, Lawrence. I'm going to be honest right there. And I'm still free range, mate, and I will always be free range. But I feel like pressure of society is one thing, and I also think if we wanted to, the best thing to do is experimentation, right? We can do control lab tests on both sides of this discussion around what AI can do. I would love to see, and if this is in your realm, Lawrence, or one of our listeners, an experiment where we run a project end to end, one with people, one with fully AI, and let's just put it in a fair and reasonable kind of control, right? That we could just review from an outsider's perspective, because I'm constantly being debated with academics and inexperienced people, and everyone's got an opinion. And I would love there to be some tests with some people of integrity, such as yourself, Lawrence, that kind of draws the line and says, okay, guys, well, you're all talking shit. This is the real results. And we could all interrogate the results rather than interrogate opinions, because I think we'll just end up in circular logic there. But I think there is a truly, there is a remarkable opportunity to do that. And I think some clients would pay to see that,
I think
in
that's
all
brilliant.
fairness. And I
Parallel
think
running, right?
parallel running.
And
I mean,
with parallel
we do
running,
this
like
now.
we've come from sort of sectors where that's a common thing, where you run the thing in parallel, and then you're adding A/B testing on top. I think that would be
100%.
a great thing to do. Yeah.
I mean, we've all done a bit of rail, right? So you think about rail projects in particular. Before you're moving trains, you're testing in labs, right? You're running scenarios, or you're making sure the software works. I can't see anything different to this. It's just full autonomy in a controlled environment, right?
But I just think this is why, like, sort of podcasts like yours and Gen AI, I think that these things are under discussed, because I think there's just so many perspectives to all these things, and I think I mean, it's good that there are more conferences and things these days talking about projects and AI and that kind of thing, but I think it's too big for us to try and solve these all in our own little companies and our own little or big consultancies and that kind of thing, and we're all encountering the same sorts of problems and challenges, and so yeah, thank you very much.
No, thank you, Lawrence. I mean, it's the stuff that you guys do out there, and I think you're doing it for free anyway. Like, you're just exploring, and then you're sharing your views on what you've done, what you didn't
So I think
do, how it works.
what I do is I do a lot of what's called build in public, because basically, I mean it's not entirely sort of selfless, Dale. As I know that's your picture of me, and it's I don't want to, but I do get I get work through it. So because people want one of theirs, right? So, but it also, I find it useful because it and it might be useful for some people to do it, at least within their companies, because you get more confident about actually how quickly you can do something as a prototype. You were talking about prototyping earlier, and actually prototype something. And very often I'll do something for a client, and then I'll figure out a different thing that I can do that's a related use case, but not the same use case, and that's smaller, and different data, and then I'll just actually do that, and then I'll share that. So often it's prompted from a client engagement, but then I will choose something that's adjacent to it, and then share that. And I think that's actually good practice for consultants, because one of the things that actually you have to teach at the bigger consultancies is you have to teach the young consultants how to take the intellectual property that was created from the last assignment, and work out which bits are exclusively the client, which bits you've agreed with the client that actually are ones that you can extract out the method and or the process and or a case study, and then how you can cleanse that with the agreement of the client, and also then what you can do with that because that case study, that could be something obviously that goes in your proposals and that kind of thing, but that can be an artifact now. It can be, this is actually a little process that, especially if and so that's one of the ways in which consultancies perpetuate themselves, providing you've agreed with the client actually what the rules of the game are. Then but that whole process is very similar to building in public, the building in public that I do, in spirit, right? And I think more people should try and do it, because it's back to, I mean, even though we can see the tensions there between your perspective on knowledge and mine, but one of the places where I definitely agree with you is there should be more of that open forum stuff, where you can, and actually, because it just makes it more fun, right? Because you end up, people gravitate towards you that are doing similar things or different things, and you just have over time you have more interesting conversations, and you end up doing more interesting work. So and we can start, hopefully we can all start going, it's happened for us, right? But for other people as well, we can start to make, like, the project, we can start to select some of the project work that's more fun, that we can do and retain, and some of the other stuff can go to the AIs and that kind of thing, so that the work can be really fun. That hopefully that could be some of the trajectory for some of us. rather than AI just being scary. Let's just make project work fun again, right? I mean, I enjoy it, but that's because you can generate these different things, and you know, there have been large parts of my project career I've not enjoyed at all. So, to be honest, right? So, I know a lot of people are there right now. Plus, they've got the fear of AI. So, so more build in public. If people are willing, I would say.
No, absolutely. I think it's breaking down barriers, you know, and on the tension of views thing, I think it's fantastic because this is why this podcast exists, is to create perspective, and we need that discourse and debate. And so, we've always said, Phil and I, challenge us on our thinking. We're just the dumb idiots that ask the questions. On the putting things out there for free as well, you know, it's not a plug for any of our consultancies on here, but we do the same. We put a whole bunch of things out there for free so people can see the art of the possible. Go and have a play. And it's not like gimmicks. It's actually real tangible stuff, you know. Go upload your XUR files and you can see how quickly you can get analysis out of it. Like, it's done quickly. But the thing that strikes me, Lawrence, is we talk a lot about AI, and rightfully so, because this is the age we're in. But in my mind, I can see this, and I think it's a dichotomy, maybe you'll tell me it's not, of focus on technology versus people that use technology. And one of the fears I have is that as long as we have people delivering projects, that we're starting to focus too much on the technology and forgetting about the people. Where do you stand with that?
Well, for me, it's quite simple in the sense that it should be, if you deploy it correctly, it should just give you more time with the people. So that's my perspective. It gives you more time for podcasts like this. I mean, I know that's far too simplistic, but actually, if you can do work in parallel, you can do that the hard bit of the work, right, which is like sending the agents off doing the thinking in 2 to 4 hours, and then you've got the whole lot. I think we talked about this before. But how we land in that organization by organization is a very different thing, because I mean, I am a bit nervous for a lot of people about how this transition is going to occur, because I think the fact that people aren't talking so very much, except with the exception of it means that people will just suddenly shift the rug, and I probably shouldn't say that, but things will just get announced. But that's why, and again, you know, rounding out to where we started this, that's why one of the reasons I'm excited about GPT-5 is the obvious point that it's a democratizing move. What they've done, it's like, it is a slightly better model. I'm using GPT. I'm lucky enough. I've got GPT-5 Pro, and it is better than O3 Pro, right? But the bigger change is that everyone can use GPT-5 a few times a day, and it's a reasoning model, and that's amazing, right? And so there is that chance that things will equilibrate by themselves. And again, my hope is partly this slow takeoff that we've got. It does give people a chance, because back to, again, an earlier thing I was saying about the gym, is that I do think that actually the more time it takes and the more people cluster F around, right, in the companies, the more time it gets chance for it to be in people's pockets, so that they actually are ahead of the middle management. And that's one of the things that will protect us, right?
It's a difficult one to answer, to be honest with you. So,
sorry?
It's a difficult one to answer. I don't think we know exactly how it's going to all play out. But it reminds me of when Val and I worked together before AI, and he was all about technology and using the latest tools. And I'd be like, what about the people? And he'd jokingly say, oh, fuck them. So is that still the same, Val?
100%. 100%. I think the people equation is kind of like a so what, because, you know, humans, we're just so self-absorbed most of the time, and there's this, particularly in the professional setting, there's this self-preservation ego thing that happens, and so people will naturally pull the anchor, even though, you know, the sails are full ahead and everything looks brighter, and we can see land in the distance, and they're like, "Whoa, I don't know if we should slow down, Val. I think this is too fast." Like, too fast for what? If you're telling me that we could accelerate the process to cure cancer globally. We could probably eradicate housing crisis, maybe even help with poverty, maybe even help with mental health, maybe perhaps give everyone a 3-day work weekend or a free weekend. Maybe we can improve our chances of space travel and everything else that's exciting on the horizon. And your response to that is, but what happens to plan as well? I think is such an inward and backwards way of thinking about the world. Not to get philosophical or spiritual with you guys, but I'm 100% okay with AI taking my job. And I think if people could sit with themselves for a bit and think about the greater good, and I know not everyone wants to, but I cannot see a way where this doesn't exceed all our expectations and become, not a competition, but a completely different way of interacting with the world. And something that really inspired me the other day, I was watching Google, is it Google Gemini or is it the Google Earth piece that they went full AI on? And then Google introduced these AI worlds that you could create through prompts, and they're all interactive.
Genie, you mean Genie?
Genie, that's
Genie
the one.
last week, yeah. That's the world building model. Yeah.
The world building model. And if you haven't had a bit of a play, and I'm just getting my head around it, but for someone who plays games a lot, video games, to understand and appreciate how much effort it takes to build these interactive models, for them to just be almost like endless possibilities in universes, it makes me come back to the theory of simulation again, Lawrence. Like, are we? I feel there's a circular logic happening here, but I feel like if we just let go of our barriers and boundaries, and other than ethics and principles, I understand that bit, but there are more endless positive possibilities than negative. And if the only thing that you draw conclusion to is I might not have a job in 5 years, I don't think that's a cause for concern or worry. I do think as well that what we will have is when you go back to dichotomies, Dale, where we say, like, once AI becomes almost relatively indistinguishable online from a human, thinks, talks, acts, behaves. There was a question put out there in the social ether about AI rights, and it reminded me of a Robin Williams movie, Bicentennial Man. I don't know if you've seen this, where he's kind of a self realizes he's a robot, an AI robot, kind of like a butler, or he was a maid. He does the cleaning and the washing and helps the kids at school. But then he has realizations and he has creativity and he starts to understand himself and become self-aware, and then he wants to become a man. And the owner gives him the right to and starts teaching him as if he was human. And he starts to pick up the traits and explore himself, and starts making wooden clocks and starts making money for himself. And the owner goes in, tries to open a bank account for him, and then they talk about human rights and AI rights. And I think going way out there, Lawrence, like, because you have to go out there to come back to reality, right? You get way out there and come back. Dale does this well for me, but I when I say fuck him, I'm not saying like I don't care about people. I think people don't care about what's possible with this stuff, and I think we'll have a very interesting conversation about what exactly is the ethical right for a semi-feeling sentient machine. I'm not saying it's self-aware. I'm saying at what line do we call it not a tool? And at what point do we then say, well, maybe the AI needs a holiday as well, and maybe AI needs... And I tell you, there's an interesting other fact. There is a company out there that is selling security robots, and their pricing model is what intrigued me about this. They're not charging a subscription, they're charging per productive hour. And I thought, that's interesting. So we have a physical AI bot, and it's obviously cheaper than a human, but they're giving it an hourly rate. And I just wonder, it's not a huge leap between that and having a workforce that is getting a salary. And then I think we have another conversation, probably Gen AI, Dale, if you could pass this one on onto the other podcast.
You just turn up?
Yeah, maybe I'll turn up and ask Alan, because he might be able to give me a real answer, But I'd love to know your thoughts, Lawrence. I do think humans get in the way of progress sometimes.
Wow, man. I mean, I love what you're saying, but it's going to scare some project people, right? So, and we're I mean, some people won't even know what you're referring to, right? So, firstly, you're referring, but I love it. But you're referring firstly to Nick Bostrom's simulation argument, and then you're referring to the sort of possibility that machines might be first sentient and or have feelings, and then might become sort of self-aware. So, help me down. Right. So I remember listening to Newsnight about like 2014. Nick Bostrom came on. And I've always read a little bit of philosophy, and I like it and that kind of thing. And this chap's a philosopher, and he came on and he sounded completely nuts, right? And he's on Newsnight, and he was saying, well, we might be living in a simulation, because if you look at the probabilities, people will just have to look up the simulation argument. But, sort of now, 10 years later, it's actually the simulation argument it's not easy. I mean, it's possible, right? But again, this tracks some of the difficulties that we're going to have. That some people are thinking so much further ahead, and it's just people are just going to get scared that this is where it's definitely going. And then let's come to your other one, and I think what I suggest on there, which is on sentience, like people think this is nuts. If you have a physicalist view of and some people do, if you have a physicalist view of what's going on in the brain, or a functionalist view of the mind, as in you just think of actually what functions it's expressing, then a lot of neuroscientists actually do think it's possible for other matter and other processes to exhibit that, at least in theory, because they say that there's nothing else going on other than the fact of the matter, other than the physics that's going on and the function that's being expressed. And if you take that seriously, I mean, I take that seriously, then you have to think, well, what do we do when we're running computation that's not our computation? I think the first thing to say is actually one concrete thing to do is it's worth, if you're interested in this and you're listening, Anthropic, actually one of the best actually doing the research, actually treating this as a line of inquiry, and actually trying to actively think that through. They have an economist, and they have a philosophers, and they're actually writing papers on this stuff. But it just sounds so out there to people. And I think, in fact, just to cheat for a second, Val, and actually bring what you're saying back into to actually answer an earlier question that we were all struggling with. This is one of the fundamental problems, or one of the fundamental disagreements that happens. It's not that people have a deflationary view of what computers can do, and or these machine learning models. It's possible that they have an inflationary view of what people are doing, and a lot of people, and I don't know I haven't got very strong opinions on this either, but I find it a very hard problem. But people have got their brains going. And they don't understand that, they can't tell if their brain is lighting up in this way, they're thinking this thing, and they can't verify what their brain is doing. So, and yet they expect that same level of verification and validation from an AI, and so this actually gets to one of the earlier hearts of the matter, if you like, in terms of actually the sort of the disagreements that we're surfacing. But then, to be like rather kind of prosaic for a minute, that stuff matters in terms of where we're going culturally, but I don't think it should matter for people on a day-to-day in terms of actually trying to keep up with some of it, like once a week or something like that, just as a self-preservation. You don't have to have a full and perfect account of why linear algebra can actually do these things. I mean, I remember doing all this linear algebra at A level, and then it got too hard for me at degree, and like doing vectors and and like velocities and accelerations on inclined planes and all that. I had no idea that linear algebra would actually be able to like give me business strategy advice like 25 years later, it's absolutely insane. I would have paid more attention. Like I would have I don't understand it, and obviously the AI people understand a lot more, but they don't understand all of it either, and they don't know their own thought processes. But you're not, by using some AI tentatively and by checking the results, you're not advocating it as something that should be used once and for all time, and is always correct. It's just something that's appeared in your world. You should be curious about it. You should be tentative about it, and you should listen to the people that have an inflationary view of it. And you and I will sound a bit like that, Val. To some people, we'll sound quite inflationary, right? And you should listen to people that have a deflationary view, and then you should still use it. You haven't even got, most of us haven't got a good account of actually when we're talking, when we're making sense and when we're not. Just because, like, if you're tired and you make a bad decision, right? Is that so very different from like an AI hallucinating? Well, what you said, you didn't make sense because you were tired, and so you couldn't get a sentence out. Well, how's that so very different from some sort of malfunction of an AI? And I'm not saying they're the same, but I'm just saying that you shouldn't. I don't think people should let that get in the way of like exploring it, because we're all grappling with it. And if you hold out and don't explore, then you won't even be able to like come up with an educated opinion about what actually is happening. Yeah, sorry, I don't know. You're asking me such hard questions, Val, man. I don't know.
No, I'm not. It maybe wasn't a question. It was more just dialogue
around. I love it.
Because I think the deeper you go, the more philosophical or spiritual you get. It doesn't matter what the problem is. You take any hard problem and you end up then in a very different thought of space. And I know it's hard because there's no right or wrong answer. So that's when you know you're in the philosophy space with it. It's a perspective thing. And when it comes to as you said, you're right. There's an inflationary piece, and you should take both the good and the bad. I mean, I'm all for resistance. I think resistance is important. It's part of the human condition. It's just at what point do, as you said, like at what point do we consider something real? And there's a physicality to that bit. When you said function, I completely agree that if you were to take the I guess the physics way of looking at everything, there's a cause and a reaction, and everything is interlocked to some degree. But then you look at human behavior and how it responds to things. And the first is the easiest anecdote or analogy around people, or the mind, from what I understand, can't tell the difference between imagination and reality. And they do this in coaching and conditioning and training. You can picture something before it happens, and it's considered practice. And they've proven that. Second thing is when you watch a movie and there's a sad moment, even though you know the actors are acting, you will still have an emotional response. So we know that we all get fooled every day when we watch a movie. The second thing is or the third thing perhaps, is that we know there's already cases of people having deep relationships and connection with chat and various other bots of AI sorts, right? And even to the point where it's becoming dangerous, right? Where people have been suicidal because AI has been not behaving. So how far then do you project that into the world and say, well, then just by causality, at some point, humans are going to have a relationship with AI. Okay, then that's going to be interesting. I mean, I know that series where a woman marries a car and has a relationship with a couch and all that, but I think this is slightly different to that, and just love future facing. But the last one, this one you could probably answer. This is an easy one for you, Lawrence.
I wouldn't pay on it, mate.
Maybe not. It's well, you said it. We probably said it a few times in the course of this podcast around like people's understanding and awareness, particularly clients. Obviously a lot more educated than they would be on other things. Like I would say they know probably more about what's happening in AI than they do in earned value or critical path method. Like we skipped a whole bit of knowledge there to just get to this output. But the question I see is, and I don't think anyone's given me a relatively good answer, but I'm just curious around education in general. One of the things that sparked my interest, Lawrence, and I want to get your feedback on this, is some of my kids' schools, so I only got two, sorry, they sound like I got an army, but they go to different schools. They're stopping people from using AI, as in there's a restriction there. And then the other side of it is they're embracing AI, and just looking for different forms of comprehension to make sure that, they do understand the context and the knowledge that they're learning. And then I'm thinking about the institutions that offer certifications in our space, linking it to project certifications, and whether there is something in that space that we could all work together towards collectively to help bridge the gap in education, because I think that's a big gap, right?
So started from the back actually on that. So one thing in the profession that I think we all should be working on, that's not quite the same as education, but is project benchmarks. Sorry, I'm taking it in, but I really think we should be having what's called holdout questions. So questions that we don't put on the internet, that are, if you like, the canonical, think of them as MBA case studies, right? For how a project expert would solve this problem, all right? And we should have a battery of them. And we should all agree as those being best in class, all right? And then we should score each new AI with a portion of those questions, and then evaluate how good they are at answering project questions. But that's not the question you asked. But that's what I think. I think we should be doing as project community. I've tried people a couple of times, and I've got absolutely nowhere with it. So, yep. Education. I mean, Sam Altman says it, doesn't he? He says that no one. I mean, these are younger children, but his new child will never be smarter than an AI, and that's the world that they're growing up in. So, I have no idea how to approach. But I mean, anything where people are not doing it at all. I mean, to be honest, that frightens me. I have no idea how to do it. I mean, I just think that as long as you're doing everything else, like people living in the real world with real families, with real books, with real practical lessons, and so long as there's a solid, as long as that's playing with friends, as long as that's 3/4 of their life, then you can go a little bit further on the AI. I don't, Val, I don't know. If I can answer just pick up on two things you said earlier on the start, to again not answer your question, which are too hard. But you're saying about reality and imagination. But there's an interesting new result that's come out, by the way, on the distinction between people being able to distinguish between a memory and an imagination. And the result indicates that it's something to do with the intensity of the experience. Tells people actually whether they classify it as a memory, or whether they classify it actually as an imagination. So if it comes back quite strong, then they tend to classify it as a memory. Anyway, that's just so. But then another thing related to that whole area, and it links to this whole physicalist discussion, is this whole AI thing. And again, this is a great thing to chat to Alan about, Dale. And in fact, he has mentioned it a couple of times. But one of the things that's almost become standard in people thinking about AI that's completely non-standard everywhere else, and I think people would benefit from being exposed to it, is understanding just a little bit of some theories around the human mind using what's called a generative model in order to actually survive in the world. So in other words, we have a very classical view. Many of us have a very classical view of actually what's going on. We have, we perceive things, we think about it, or we act, and then we act, and then we see the actions in the world. But there's an increasing number of sort of different theories out there. If you look at people like Friston or Eagleman, a whole number of other people, things like active inference, predictive processing are the kind of Google terms. But essentially, one of the reasons why AI is particularly interesting is that it's a generative. The current ones that we're using, the Gen AI, right? They're generative models of the world, mostly through language and other modes. But there's a reasonably strong case that a large part of what's going on is that we actually generate a model of the world that gets corrected by surprise. So in other words, like when you're walking along, you're actually predicting what you're seeing, and I know this sounds nuts. just read Eagleman. And then when something happens that you hadn't predicted, then or something appears, then you overcorrect. Okay, so and actually often you'd sense that with something called surprise, and surprise is the difference between your prediction, so what you expected to see, and actually some sense data. So in other words, we're much more parsimonious or frugal about our sense data than we think. I mean, and an example of that, right, is that people know about the fovea in their eye. So the fovea is the bit where you focus, just a little bit, the tiny little bit that you focus on when you're looking. That's actually a really small solid angle, okay? And all of the rest of it, they can show you that actually you're actually taking in, there's far more information out in this area than actually you're likely to be able to process. And so, for example, your receptors in the far corners of your eyes can only pick up black and white, right? But I have a sense that over there it's a bit whitish. So the idea is that there's a generative model that's like filling in from my expectations about what's going on, and then when I see something that jars, okay, what's going on is the generative. I'm living in my generative model, and then the sense data is like when something comes up that doesn't match, it rushes that into my model and updates. Now, this might be wrong and all that, but it might help people a little bit, but probably not, to understand that this is why people like AI engineers and things like so convinced about so many things, and why they don't see such a big difference, because they're dealing with generative models, and a lot of neuroscientists are saying that, look, we've got to, in order to cope with all this data that's coming in, we're actually living in our own. Think of it as, I'm going to get so unpopular with this, but a controlled hallucination. So it's a hallucination that's controlled by reality. Okay, so reality, like when you stumble on a stone, right? That data comes in, but you've already predicted that you're walking smoothly, right? And that's where you get that. Anyway, so and that might make some people very like a little bit less like terrified of AI, because it's not actually operating necessarily so very differently from what a lot of what's might be going on in our brains, and so that makes some of it feel a bit more inevitable to people like me. That it's like, well, hang on a minute, this whole movement, a change of technology is a chance for us to reframe and re-understand in a fresh way how we are in the world and how we are together, right? So it's a way of seeing it. So that's as much part of the whole thing, and it has to be, otherwise, like, it's going to be a horrible mess. We have to just like, sort of with Copernicus, and like we had to learn what it meant that we weren't, we weren't living in the center, the Earth wasn't the center, etc. And it's one of those, I would suggest, right? And actually, this is part of the fun of it, and why you don't have to agree with everything, but you just need to come along a little bit for the ride, because probably a lot of the things we think about the world and our assumptions, they're probably up for a bit of a revamp. So it's as much so even like the hallucinations, like from 3 or 4 years ago, that was so valuable, because it makes you think, well, look, okay, haha, isn't it funny, and all that kind of thing. But how much, how often do I do that, right? So if you're reflecting it as much back, then it becomes a much more exciting experience rather than us tool. It becomes more of a thing about making sense of the world. And it looks like making sense of the world is a bit more common than we thought it was. Like, we already had all these species that make sense of the world in their own ways, and now it looks like language allows something else to make some sort of sense of the world. It doesn't have to be conscious to do that, but that's like a miracle, right? So that helps us understand like a little bit about language, and we're now way off topic.
This is great. I love it, Lawrence. So I wanted to comment there on a few things. I'll touch on the language. I mean, there's 100%. There's a where I'm from in South Australia, there's actually something on the river, a little stone that says, "The limit of my language is the limit of my world." And it's been something I've carried with me my whole career, actually. Very philosophical, but it is a true point. And if you ask anyone who speaks more than one language, they see the world differently. They have different describing. So the modality, the reality they're living, having a wife who's Chilean, who when they speak and when they express, it's a different meaning in their terms. And I know Dale's
100%.
nodding because he speaks a few languages, so it's a completely different experience. Most people who don't understand that would say, "Oh, it's just another word for the same thing." No, it's not. And there are words that do not have equal meaning, so they're not the same model. And I remember Sam Altman also talking about if we really want AI to have an impact in the world, we've got to give it physicality, as in it can only learn so much within a lab. And think about the lab being the entire human knowledge, the entire library, the internet, everything we've known to date. It's kind of up to that point where I think they've exhausted all kind of areas of ingestation, if you like, other than the physical world. We can describe the physical world to AI, but then we are the filter. Back to your peripheral point, I think the next step would be to let AI out in the physical world and almost go through growing up without boundaries, without limitation. And there's a great kids movie. I don't know if you've seen this one, Lawrence. It's called Wild Robot. And it's exactly that. Yeah. A robot gets stuck in the wild and kind of reprograms itself to understand all the languages of the animals, and then ends up becoming empathetic. And yeah, it's a great story about a robot becoming, wild in a way. And it's a very clever animation. But Dale, what are you thinking of Lawrence and I's hallucinations?
I'd love it as well. Probably no surprise. The thing I was thinking about was a couple of things, actually. One, the way you're describing there, Lawrence, how humans are, and it got me thinking, actually, we're just generative human intelligence, right? Because that's what we do. So generative artificial intelligence is not too different to generative human intelligence, if you think about it from that perspective. I was asked on a little while back on another podcast, how do I define artificial intelligence, or how do I make it accessible? So, well, if you break it down, artificial, there's many different meanings, but a lot of people think it's fake. But artificial is actually just made by humans. So the clothes we wear, the buildings we're in, the cars, it's just human made. And intelligence, you can sort of break it down to the ability to reason or make judgment. So it's a human made ability to reason or make judgment. So it's not actually that scary, right? So as you were chatting there, I was like, there's actually not that big of a difference. And going back to the whole philosophical side of, AI having feelings, etc. Yeah, it's not that far of a stretch. 18 months time, who's out there saying, well, what Lawrence predicted on the Project Chatter podcast 18 months ago is not going to be true, because a lot of what you said 18 months ago has come to fruition. The one thing I do want to ask you, though, is when you're talking about how we predict what's going to happen and then reality happens, is that called variance? Just checking, asking for a friend. Is that called variance?
So there are different ways of actually computing that. Let me think. Oh, hang on, I just
just asking for a friend. I know it's late.
Oh, you really got me on that one. Ow. I actually give you a proper answer. Is that the best way of calculating it is with something called the free energy, which actually calculates the difference between the prediction and the actual data that you get in, but and calculates it over time. So it allows you to actually learn and adjust your model over time. You're a cunning man, Mr. Dale. I will say, Dale, sorry, I know you're going to sign off, but Dale, just one thing on what you were saying on the intelligence is just to hopefully reassure people is that intelligence isn't just because we're talking about intelligence. It doesn't mean that the value we're saying that the value of a human is limited to our intelligence. I'm not saying, I don't think any of us are saying that the value and the meaning of our lives is trapped by that aspect. There's how we experience the world, our moral obligations, our own experience of ourselves, and those things aren't per se intelligence. It's possible that an artificial intelligence might develop some of those things because we don't know what comes along for the ride when there's something processing something like with intelligence. We don't know what other phenomena go along with that. But that is just absolutely not, because I think this is one of the other things that happens, is that this whole thing becomes an argument because people say, well, you're denying the whole importance and the meaning of my life, but we don't need to collapse everything down to intelligence, because our the meaning of our life is not that. And I don't think any of us are saying that. And also, just hopefully, if I say that, then we'll get less comments in that respect, Dale.
No, I think one thing we do on this podcast is put strong opinions out there, loosely held. So if anyone wants to challenge us, come ahead and give us a good argument, and we'll change our minds. But look, Lawrence, it's been absolutely fantastic to have you back on the pod. We try to keep this shorter in season 9 just because of feedback, but Val and I had a fantastic time chatting to you, so we kept going. I've no doubt that listeners will have a fantastic time listening to this discussion as well. So we thank you so much for coming back and sharing your thoughts, your views, your opinions, questioning us as well. Before we let you go, any final thoughts you want to leave the listeners with?
No, I'm completely overwhelmed by the experience, gentlemen. I've loved it. So, wow. This is what we should all be doing, right? This is the opportunity that we have, is let's all have fun doing this, because what choice do we have? I mean, let's make it. And none of us know what the hell is going on. So let's just share that ignorance going forward, right? Even into our projects. Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Val.
No, you're welcome. Val, any final thoughts?
No, it's been a great Lawrence wave. I mean, there's a lot for people to digest. Just in references alone, I think people will be Googling or ChatGPTing this entire episode. But Lawrence, you're a wealth of information, and keep doing what you're doing, mate. We're very, very honored to have you on the pod again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Couldn't have said it any better myself. Look, folks, that is the end of this episode. But remember, if you like what you've heard, please do help us pay it forward and share a link to this episode on your favorite social media. Once again, a massive thank you to our guest, Lawrence Rowland, and thank you all for listening. Till next time, we say stay safe, be disruptive, and have fun doing it. From me and Val, it's bye for now.